Everybody, we're gonna get started now. It's about 7 o'clock. So today we're gonna be talking about trophic pyramids, and it's basically like another fancy word for a food web. If you don't know what a food web is, I'm gonna assume most of you have already heard of it, but it's just kind of like how it shows what things eat what in an ecosystem. Okay, and so my warm up for you is to watch this video. It's about 8 minutes long and it's on wolves in Yellowstone National Park. And my warm up for you is to write down as many animals that you see or hear in the video. And the reason for this video is that it's a pretty good introduction to what we're going to be talking about today, which is like the flow of energy in an ecosystem or like a select area. So yeah, and it's about 8 minutes long, so I'll leave you guys to do that. And yeah. And I'll just go ahead and play this video on my screen as well.
Yellowstone, the world's first national park, protected to ensure that it was always wilderness, to inspire the human spirit for generations to come. Yellowstone, the world's first national park, protected to ensure that was always wilderness, to inspire the human spirit for generations to come. It all began in 1995, when Yellowstone park workers released 31 grey wolves into the wild over the year, and did not interfere with their lives at all. Although they expected certain changes, they certainly did not expect the cascade of environmental change it will cause. To this day, ecologists are astonished by the continuing wave of direct and indirect consequences of this step throughout the ecosystem.
The Northern Range is the hub of wildlife in Yellowstone. So much of the wildlife in Yellowstone lives here. It's 10% of the area of the park, yet half the wolves live here. It's arguably the most carnivore-rich area in North America, and it's been studied a lot.
The Northern Range has been referred to as the Serengeti of North America, and that's because of the vast numbers of ungulate species mostly. And so when people look out, they may, in one afternoon, in the valley bottom of a Northern Range valley, they may see bison, elk, pronghorn, mule deer, wolves and bears, and all of these species interacting with each other.
Well, the Northern Range is the northern area of the park where the northern Yellowstone elk herd spends the winter. So it's winter range for the biggest elk herd in the park. And it's probably the densest year-round wolf population at any location in North America. We roughly have 35 to 40 wolves year-round in the park portion of the Northern Range, but we've been as dense as 100 wolves just in the northern part of Yellowstone. And we have pretty high bear densities and cougar densities as well. So we have a great mix of carnivore species, and we have high density. 50 years ago, that was not the case.
We came into the Northern Range as Yellowstone was designated a park and changed a lot of things. So wolves, coyotes, mountain lions, bears to some degree were all being removed in vast numbers.
Wolves were eliminated by people directly in the early part of the 20th century. So what happens when you kill off the predators? Well, the prey increases to very high levels and starts impacting the environment. And by doing that, the elk herd shot up, and no one really knows how high they shot up. 20, 30,000 was the estimated figure. And they were degrading the environment. Our policy on helping restore nature is fairly clear. If humans did it, we'll help the system get back on the right track. So what was missing were all these carnivores. And so they were not performing their ecological function. Cougars came back to Yellowstone on their own through natural dispersal. We started seeing signs of that in the 80s, and we reintroduced wolves in the mid-90s. And now that wolves and cougars have been restored and bears have increased, the new story is about what happened to all the elk and what is happening to the willow and aspen now that the elk have declined and these carnivores are back.
The willow is relied on by a lot of animals, and so it's kind of a positive feedback loop. The more willows there are, the more moose and beaver, and the healthier the ecosystem because of those animals being involved too. And so beavers are, of course, nature's engineers, and they'll build lodges and dams that will help raise the water tables. And raising the water table is one of the things that the willows rely on the most. They can't deal with cut banks and swiftly moving creeks. They have to have that slow-moving water.
So this smaller elk herd is more natural. We're seeing a response of willow and aspen, which used to be suppressed. We've got wolves and cougars back. We've got more bears. So Yellowstone's system now is a National Park Service success story.
I think the Northern Range is incredibly unique, not only for the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, but for the world. Protecting Yellowstone is important to just protect the species that live here, but also provide people a place to be able to see natural processes and use that throughout their life for making decisions on what they think is important.
I think a huge value of the national parks is to instill awe of nature into people. Going out on a landscape filled with grizzly bears is not the same as, going to the mall. And seeing wolves bring down an elk or seeing two wolf packs clash right in front of you are life-altering events. There's no question we are changing people's lives by having places like Yellowstone. And the Northern Range is probably the heart of the park, and the park's the heart of the ecosystem. So it's all built upon each other, but at ground zero is the Northern Range.
Okay, well, I'm gonna end the video right there. So basically, to summarize, that video was on the wolves in Yellowstone National Park. So like today you can see that there's a lot of wolves, but as the video said before, when there were no wolves, like what the wolves ate, which was like the deer, it kind of got out of control. And so that kind of just upset the whole entire balance. And so that's kind of like what we will be talking about today. All right, and so to like kind of put into what we just saw into like a diagram, we will be talking about trophic pyramids or a model of how energy flows through an ecosystem. And so food gives animals or living organisms energy, and so that's why it's a model of energy. And trophic pyramid, it means feeding because troph means to feed. And so, yeah, that's kind of some basic vocabulary. And so, as you can see, the trophic pyramid is organized into levels. This is just an example of what a trophic pyramid could look like in reality. You could have an infinite number of these levels. You could have 6 levels or 5, depending on how many organisms you have. And so the way I organize this is that on one side we have the description of energy in one level, and the other side we have some examples of organisms that belong to that tier or level. And so, yeah, and yeah, that's basically kind of it. All right, so our first level would be trophic level 1, which are producers. And so producers mainly consist of plants that use the sun's energy to make their own food. And so most, if not all, of the animals or things you find on this level are autotrophs. And so just based on what I said before, troph means to feed and auto means self. So based on that, what do you guys think autotroph means? And you can type that in the chat or just like say it out loud. Yeah, Bowen, I think that's, sorry if I mispronounced your name, but yeah, autotrophs, they kind of like self-feed or automatically feed themselves, like kind of how plants do photosynthesis. So yeah, the producers, they are self-feeding, so they don't get their energy from eating anything else, they just make their own energy. And so from the video, I asked you guys to write down as many animals or like plants or just any organisms that you saw or heard being mentioned in the video. And so based on my previous explanation of what producers are, can anybody give me some examples of any plants that you or things that belong in this tier? Yeah, so from the video, grass and weeds, I wasn't really specifically looking for any specific examples, but yeah, grass and Yeah, so there were the trees. There was the willow and the aspen trees. Those are producers because they are plants and they make their own food. Also, I don't think if anybody caught this, but there were also some water plants that like animals who lived in the water ate. So yeah, that's what the first trophic level is. And so our second trophic level are primary or first consumers. And so these animals, they get their energy or their food from the level below, which are the producers. For example, like an animal from this tier would eat a plant or anything else from our producer level. And so, yeah, and another thing worth mentioning is that as you move up, not all the energy in the food will be used for the animal. Actually, most of it will be lost to the environment in the form of heat, light, or sound. And so, yeah, actually only 10% of the energy makes it to the next level. And so to kind of put that into like a more manageable way to think of it, like if you have 100 plants as your producer, only 10% or 10 of those plants will actually be used for food in our organisms in our second level. And so again, based on our video, can anybody tell me some examples that they think are primary or first consumers? Yeah, Angela and I think one other person, elk and beavers and deer. Well, like elk are kind of deer, but yes, they are our primary or first consumers because they eat the plants from below. And so that's kind of like the everything on our second trophic level. And so moving on to our third level, these are our secondary consumers. And these animals or organisms get their energy from the level below, which are the primary consumers or the producers in at least one instance. So like if you have, so like an organism from this level could eat like an elk from below, or it could eat a plant from the producers, and that's why they're in our trophic level, level 3 of our pyramid. And again, as you go up the pyramid, most of the energy in the food will be lost. So only 10%. Yeah, so 10% would be moving up. And so can anybody give me any examples for our secondary consumers from the video? Yeah, so bears, wolves, and cougars, they make up our secondary consumers because they will eat they will eat anything from our primary or first consumer. So like a bear might eat some berries that belong to our producers, or it could also eat the elk. And as you saw in the video, like our primary example was the wolves who ate the elk. So yeah, those are some examples of our um our secondary consumers. And so for our last level, only for this pyramid, again, like I said, a trophic pyramid could have as many levels as needed. It does not necessarily always have 4. So for our 4th level, it is our tertiary or third consumers. And so again, with these animals, they get their energy from the level below or our secondary consumers in at least one instance. And so, yeah, again, could anybody give me some examples from the video? Okay. Okay, yeah, this one might be a little more challenging because some of these animals we've already talked about. But yeah, I think some people in the chat said cougars. They are tertiary consumers because I'm not entirely sure, but I think that cougars can and will eat wolves. And yeah, so that's why like they are on the 4th tier because they can eat anything below them. And so you might have noticed that throughout the pyramid, there are some species that occurred multiple times. And that is because, like I said, an animal can belong to any tier as long as it gets or it can eat something from the level below in at least one instance. So for example, you could have your bears on our trophic. So for example, bears can eat both plants and animals. So they could belong to our 2nd level or our primary consumers because they could eat some berries, which are producers, but they could also belong to our 3rd trophic level, which is the secondary consumers because they could eat the elk who belong to our 2nd level. And so that is basically the gist of our trophic pyramid. It's kind of like a hierarchy of how and what animals eat what in like a given space or ecosystem. And the main thing to remember is that the higher up the pyramid, the less energy available. That's why like maybe like in the park or the video as you saw, there were so many plants, but as you went up, there were less and less animals. So like when you got to the wolves, which were, I believe they were secondary consumers, there were only about 50 of them at the start. Meanwhile, there were like thousands and thousands of plants. And that is just because as you move up the pyramid, there will be less and less energy available. And so to kind of put this to the test, I found this kind of like a food web of our own Puget Sound area. And so these are some fish or like animals that live in this area. And so I want you to create your own trophic pyramid based on what you see, what eats what. And so the arrows, they point to what eats what. So for example, our juvenile fishes are eaten by our Pacific herring. And so the arrow just points into the direction of what eats what. And the stuff like over here, I think it's about chemistry. You don't need to pay too much attention to. It's just like some unnecessary information. The main thing that you just need to know is that the arrows point to what eats what. So based on that, I kind of want you to organize everything in this diagram into as many levels as needed on a trophic pyramid. And I'll give you guys about 10 minutes to do that. Or when you're just done, you could tell me and then we will move on. And to start off, I'll give everybody a hint. So if you see the juvenile fishes and other nekton, they don't have anything pointing towards them. Or like you could see that they don't eat anything, so you could probably infer that they belong to our first level of the trophic pyramid or our producers. And so that's just kind of to get you started. All right, everybody. We're gonna start wrapping up our food pyramid. Our trophic pyramid about now. And so, if you guys have your order ready, just keep it somewhere nearby, and we will fill out like the trophic pyramid together. All right, so here we have our trophic pyramid. I think a lot of you already said this before, but yeah, on our first level, we will have our juvenile fishes and other nekton because they are our producers and they form like the food for everybody else. So those are our producers. And so on our next level, can anybody tell me what they got for our second trophic level? So basically,
I got Pacific hake, herring, and sand lace and walleye pollock.
yes, that is very good. That's basically everything that eats that. So and yeah. And so moving on to our third trophic pyramid, our third trophic level, again, can anybody tell me what they got?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, what I got for secondary consumers is squid, rockfish, Pacific salmon, and Pacific cod.
Yes, so basically everything that eats the stuff below. I'm not gonna, yeah, I'll type this out later, but just to keep time going. However, I should also probably mention that orcas also belong to this level because they eat everything that belongs to that box below as well. Okay, and yeah, going on to our fourth level, which is basically anything that eats the squid, rockfish, salmon, and cod. Who can tell me what belongs to there?
Killer whales.
Yes, killer whales do eat everything below. However, there's one more fish or stuff that can also belong to this level.
I also got lingcod.
Yes, lingcod also eat the stuff below. So for here we have our orcas and lingcod. And so for our final level, which is like the tip of the pyramid, I don't know what the name is for this either, but we're just gonna call it our fourth, trophic level 4. And yeah, I'm pretty sure this is already pretty obvious, but who can tell me what belongs in this level?
Orcas.
Yes, the orcas are at our top of our food chain because they will eat anything below in at least one instance, which gives them like kind of like the top spot in our trophic pyramid. All right, and so to kind of end our lesson today, it's almost time. I will give you guys another exit ticket, kind of like last time. And so my question for you is, so like based on taking from our example that we just did, which are the orcas and everything, actually you could choose between these two examples. You could choose the Yellowstone one or the orca one. Where do you think humans belong on our trophic pyramid? And I'll type that in the chat if you guys did not get it. And once you guys have answered that or like provided me with an explanation as to why, you guys are free to go. We're basically out of time, so yeah.